Fantastic. Mike, thanks for being on the show.
It's great to be here. Thanks for allowing this to happen. I know you're down in Florida right now doing hurricane relief, so I feel sort of privileged to be able to pull off a podcast with you.
I was going to say it feels like the impossible. And you and I had actually connected something like 5 months ago, and we had planned to do this episode. And time really caught up with me. I had no idea that we were going to be down here doing disaster relief in Florida. And so that's what I've been up to for the last 5 or so weeks. And but I'm so happy that we're still making it possible. And as I mentioned to you off camera, I, in a hurry, went to Best Buy yesterday and just started buying a bunch of gear to, but and then hopefully the internet connection will be okay for our listeners. And it's funny, I'm staying in an Airbnb with 6 other adjusters, right? And I got the kids' room. And there's actually no door. So people might be coming and going, but they know what I'm doing. And so if they're a bother, hopefully won't be distracting. But I digress.
That's hilarious, actually. Whenever I end up in the kids' room at an Airbnb, it always has bunk beds. I don't know if you have it there, but like it's never quite long enough. I'm a little over 6 foot, and a lot of those bunk beds are like 5 foot. It's 5 or whatever. And it's always
exactly. No, what you can't see is that I've got an air mattress. It's better than the couch that they gave me.
Nice.
But my back is still okay with me. It's happy. So
it's nice. That's awesome.
Well, Mike, I want to, this is actually our first time kind of, I would say talking in person, but it's online. But I want to hear more about your story and what your background is.
It's an interesting one. I grew up here in Southeast Iowa. Like a lot of people my age, I left right after graduation. It was sort of a thing back in the late 90s. They called it the Great Iowa Brain Drain. It's really not that. It's the Great Rural Iowa Youth Drain, if you will. Like everybody left, and they went to cities. They went to Des Moines, they went to Iowa City, Cedar Rapids, or they went to Chicago, the big one, Chicago. I didn't. I went off to Denver and then eventually to Dallas. Found myself in a career all around nonprofit work, mostly fundraising, helping connect donors with mission and with organizations that do good in the world, if you will. And all at the time was very connected to my faith, still is very much so, but I don't really like going there. Just so you know, with politics, when people connect politics to God, that sort of bothers me a little bit. So I won't be going, so you know. But my journey has been working for a couple churches, mostly the Catholic Church. I was a lobbyist for them for 4 years up in Des Moines. I worked for Catholic Charities in both Denver and in Davenport. And then I was worked for a seminary, actually, for a fundraising consulting gig at one point in time. But most recently, though, with UNICEF USA, get to travel the globe a little bit and do development work and show larger donors the kind of work their money was going toward for kids and child development around the world. And then eventually made my way back to Iowa. It's funny, when you go and see the rest of the world, you realize just how precious your home is and how wonderful. You think of the world as these mysterious new things, and then you realize, we're all pretty much the same, no matter where you go, really. And so we moved our family back because I wanted to be closer to my dad. My mom had passed away about 10 years ago, and I wanted to be a little closer to my dad, and I wanted to raise my kids in a small rural school here in Mount Pleasant, just because of the connectedness and the sense of community you get in those schools. And we made the move. It was tough finding a job that I qualified for in this region, but we found one at Iowa Wesleyan. So I was the fundraiser there, the vice president for university advancement for there. We led them through their almost closing. It started about 6 months before we almost closed our doors. They brought me in to help stop that. And we barely made it, but we did and kept going. And then right now, because what I saw in Southeast Iowa, trying to do fundraising and the lack of really economic development opportunities here, I got really interested in economic development. And so the last years, my entire focus has been on rural economic development and growing our rural economies here in Southeast Iowa. There's the long version of it. Sorry about that.
No, it's fantastic. And I realize we both have that in common, right? We grew up in Southeast Iowa. I was born and raised in Fairfield.
Nice.
And I'm 34 now, but I still live in Fairfield. I love it there. And I've done a fair amount of traveling too. But yeah, there was sort of the major exodus of my friends. And over the years, they've slowly started to come back and realize that, you know what, our upbringing was something really special. And, you know, when you get to be that age, you know, when people are starting families, they're like, I think I want to do it in Fairfield. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I just love it in Fairfield.
It's a special place. I'm learning more and more about Fairfield just by running for office, right? I always knew it growing up. I had a lot of rivals over in Fairfield in sports and that stuff. And a lot of them became my good friends in college, you know, after you meet. We met at the University of Iowa after playing against each other for years. But I didn't really know a whole lot about the culture there. I didn't know a whole lot about the businesses there and just the overall vibe that Fairfield has. And it's been really cool. I didn't realize that this is little sort of gem. And I mean, every town is unique in its own way and they're all wonderful in their own unique way. But Fairfield has this very unique vibe that just has this energy about it. That is just, I love traveling there. It's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I'm curious too, like what set you on this path of saying, hey, I want to be state representative?
I don't think anyone would wish this on their worst enemy, to be honest.
You're catching like a ton of, I mean, if you're on the internet,
oh yeah,
geez,
you know, there's so much vitriol out there between parties. It's just not okay. And, you know, on January 6th, after that happened, a bunch of friends and I were talking to each other and we're like, it went too far. It's gone too far. And, you know, we're all sort of rural, moderate Democrats. Some of us are Republicans, but we're sitting there drinking a beer in our garage and we're just like, this isn't okay. This is not okay. This is not who we are as Republicans, as Democrats. This is not about the issues. And, you know, the vitriol was coming from both sides. Don't get me wrong. It really was coming from both sides in many ways, but to attack the Capitol that crossed the line for me and it crossed the line for a lot of people that I hang out with. And we decided to start a podcast a lot like this, middle of COVID. We have nothing else to do. We're sitting there, we're working online, you know, mostly. And so we're sitting in our garage drinking a beer. We're like, what do microphones cost? How do you You're like, we have no clue what we're doing, right? But we did it anyway. And we started talking politics. Now, my background is economic development. It's fundraising. It's community partnerships and grants and things like that. I have a master's degree in nonprofit management. And so community engagement's part of, you know, sort of my fiber at this point. My other guy that we're called the Three Rural White Guys. And there's a reason for that name we can get into later, but one of them is heavily involved in emergency medical services in rural America, and the third guy is a data scientist. He's a poli-sci professor at the University of Iowa. He's a data scientist for GoDaddy, and we're looking at all this stuff, all the details around healthcare, all the details around political trends and changes in America, in Iowa, and even in our county, and we're like, someone's got to talk about this. No one's mentioning it. No one's speaking up, number one, against January 6th in our community, including, I might add, our elected officials. They wouldn't even speak out against it. You know, we actually went on a couple different chamber event meetings and asked them just to condemn it, just to say it wasn't okay. And they wouldn't. They compared it to like Seattle. They compared it to all these things. I'm like, we're not talking about Seattle. We're talking about people that literally ransacked our Capitol with the goal of stopping the certification of a legal and fair election. And no one would talk about it here in Mount Pleasant. They didn't even talk about it on the radio. We had sorry, I'm getting off here a little bit, but
it's good.
We had our Republican county chair of the party here literally post on behalf of the Republican Party that what was going on January 6th, what was going on at the Capitol right now is the new revolution. So get locked and loaded and be ready. And it's about to be the new a new American revolution, except this time it's between red and blue. And I'm just like, why aren't we talking about this? The leader of the Republican Party in Henry County, where I live, is talking about going to war. He's talking about violence against Democrats. Clearly. Not even
and not just war, civil war.
Civil war. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So we're just like, we have to say something, because our local radio station decided to hide it. They decided it wasn't worthy of news. It made national news, but it really wasn't picked up on anywhere. And so we decided, you know what? No one else is going to be a voice about it. We're going to be a voice. And so we started talking about it. We tried to play moderate a little bit, because we're rural Democrats. But ultimately, though, we got caught up in politics, really for the first time for me, and for and Jacob too, one of our co-hosts, not for the poli-sci professor. But we started doing the research. We started deep diving into all these issues, not conspiracy theories online, and not Google searching everything, but actually going into the data sets, the actual legislation that was being proposed, the actual, just everything that was based on science and fact, and how we got to this point right now politically. And so it became a passion suddenly. And we got to the point where the signatures were due in June, or I guess it would be in March of last spring. And no one had put their names in to run for this office. And we were about to potentially have, Joe Mitchell's a good friend of mine. He's a sort of a moderate Republican. And then Jeff Shipley, who represents Fairfield and used to be a different district that extended over to Davis County, now includes Mount Pleasant. Jeff Shipley is not a traditional Republican. I'm not going to talk bad about Jeff. He's my opponent. I've made it just clear I'm not going to degrade my opponent here, but he is not a traditional Republican, and I think any Republican will tell you that. And not bad or good, he's just not a traditional Republican. So I'm not okay with that. I didn't want that non-traditional Republican representing Mount Pleasant, and he had a good chance of winning the primary. And so I'm like, you know what? Let's throw our name in the hat. So a day before the signatures were due, we got 75 signatures, drove them up to Des Moines, and got our name in the ring. There's a
fantastic
story to your podcast. So I'm used to talking. Sorry.
I know, and I love this. That also on the other end here, that you have your microphone, your headphones. I feel like we're getting good quality audio, and it's nice to actually be able to just relax and feel like I don't have to worry about that stuff, because it's usually just me in the studio, and maybe you can relate to this, but I'm the guy who's running both cameras, but I'm also the host.
Right.
I'm also the editor.
Well, you're trying to hit buttons or adjust the audio. Yeah.
It's a whole lot. But and I'm also just generally curious, how many episodes have you done? Is it a weekly thing or?
Yeah. It sort of depends. We definitely are amateur hour at the Apollo, right? We have about 1,000 listeners. We do, I would say, every week when we're really in the zone, for about 5 or 6 weeks straight. And then suddenly you have a 2 or 3 week break. The campaign, it's been, I think we just put out our first episode in a month and a half, just because we're busy. But we're 4 seasons in. Each season's about 10 to 15 episodes. And so we're about maybe 40 episodes or so. So not very, but we're having fun. Yeah.
Yeah. That's great. I'm curious how your perspective might have changed from that initial day of saying, hey, I'm going to toss my name into the ring, to what the campaign process has been like to you. And has it changed your perspective in any way, or have certain things kind of surfaced as being more of a priority than you anticipated?
For sure. So right at the very beginning, after spending a year and a half looking at how politics was being done especially by the Democrats in the state of Iowa, we came out with a different approach. We're like, you know what? It doesn't work. What the Democrats have been doing, especially in rural Iowa, has failed over and over and over again. It's obvious based on the fact that they can't seem to elect anybody anymore in rural districts. And so we decided to take a different approach. And that was to listen. And I know that sounds cliche, but we're not going to take on whatever the federal Democratic Party decides is important. We're not going to, take on whatever their platform is. We're going to listen to what the needs are in our community, and we're going to represent that, actually be representatives And so for the last 6 months, it's just been like a listening tour nonstop in Van Buren County and the southern part of Jefferson County and the little, Mount Pleasant in the southwest part of Henry County, and just go into community after community and senior citizen center after senior citizen center, and, healthcare professional group meetings and teacher meetings, and just nonstop listening and figuring out what do we need in our community to make it better? What are we struggling with? What do we love about our district? And it has been eye-opening. I've been able to see a lot of the beauty that people see in Iowa that I had sort of taken for granted, especially in Van Buren County. Oh my gosh, just a gorgeous, gorgeous place with the rivers and it's just gorgeous. Going down there every time, I just get joy, seriously. But also hardships. I met with, at the Senior Citizen Center in Keosauqua with a bunch of healthcare professionals, and their clinics are barely surviving because Medicaid got privatized, and their reimbursement rates are 20-30% what they were 2 years ago. Here in Mount Pleasant, it's consolidated our hospital system with Great River and Burlington because we lost $2 million a year after they privatized Medicaid. Keokuk, not in the district, is about to close, right? So you hear the beauty, you hear the wonder and the amazement of our district, but you also hear what the struggles are and the tensions and the points of conflict. And they're very real for a lot of people. And it has gotten worse over the last 10, 20 years. And it can be very clearly connected with legislation that was passed over the last 10, 20 years as well. So that's been eye-opening, just to see that direct correlation, but also to just see how beautiful our district is.
Yeah. And healthcare being one of the primary things that you're focusing on?
It is, yeah. So healthcare would be a biggie. Education is also a biggie. Healthcare, just because it's, being in Mount Pleasant and seeing our hospital have to consolidate during the middle of the pandemic was really heartbreaking to me. And to hear about Keokuk closing their hospital is heartbreaking. But even to hear about chiropractors and dentists barely keeping their doors open because most people can't afford to pay the normal costs, and they're on Medicaid. And then a lot of the healthcare professionals can't take Medicaid patients because they couldn't keep the lights on if they did. There's one dentist in all of Van Buren County, and she's there, lives in Fairfield, but she drives down, and she can barely keep the lights on. But she has to take Medicaid patients, right? So yeah, that healthcare would be a big one. Education is probably my second most passionate issue after touring the district. Just the complete underfunding of our system over the last 10 years and really frustration. One of the big things we dealt with when we were in the podcast was this claim by the state Republicans, including Joe Mitchell and Jeff Shipley, that we've spent more this year on education than ever in history, right? And then just leaving it at that, not explaining that, we haven't kept up with inflation. You can give a 1% increase, but if inflation's 3%, that's a decrease in people's ability to pay their bills, right? You're not increasing teacher pay when you do that. Not to mention, education has become more expensive over the years. There's so many more mandated, as well as just needs in our school district. And there's also a higher level of poverty in our school district. And so there are more needs that demand teachers' attention. And so when you end up with bigger classroom sizes, and you end up having to, dwindle your staffing down to its bare minimum because you haven't had funding keep up with the needs, you end up with problems. You end up with behavior problems. You end up with kids not getting the treatment they need, the support they need, and you end up with test scores being far, far lower than they have been in decades. And that's where we're at right now. And so there's an obvious correlation there that they try to smooth it over. They got to be able to get their tax cuts in, and education is the biggest appropriation in the state. So if you lower the cost of education, it's easier to justify a tax cut. Sorry, you can see me getting a little bit into the politics, but yeah, those two are big ones. But my biggest one by far, and I want to talk about this separately maybe here in a bit, is economic development in rural communities. But we'll go there here in a little bit if that's okay.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So, like funding schools, it seems to pay for everything but a teacher's increased salary. So what do they mean by that? When is it the quality of cafeteria food? What's going on here?
So every bit of state funding that goes towards schools usually has some kind of restriction to it, right? We spend we have a formula, and every single district has a little bit different type of income they get from the state based on the appropriation each year. That formula is based on property taxes. So the state's in charge of increasing that overall amount that schools can charge, they can spend, I should say, or decreasing it or keeping it where it's at. And they usually will keep it where it's at or just a little bit more than what it was the year before. Then property taxes come into play and the wealth of the district comes into play, et cetera, in order to keep you sort of a sense of equity amongst our rural and our urban communities, which I think is a great thing. But ultimately, though, the vast majority of funding above and beyond that is for very restrictive things like building improvements or special programs for certain groups. But the little piece that actually increases salary for teachers is the part that the legislature decides on every single year. And that's the one that, for some reason, the Republican Party of 2022 or Republican Party last 2 decades has been super aggressive against. You know, for years, Republicans and Democrats would increase that by 2 to 3, maybe 4% sometimes. And for some reason, the Republican Party has been like 1.7 is the max we can go. And there's been times where it's been it's been 0. One time they finally did 2.5. I can't remember what year it was, but it was under the Branstad administration, and he vetoed it. It was one of the highest ones they did in years, and it wasn't even close to what they were doing 20 years ago. And we're seeing a mass exodus as a result of that. All of our teachers are leaving. We have the largest exodus of teachers in history of Iowa this year because they feel incredibly disrespected. And that's after gutting their ability to collective bargain in 2017. So like we're just destroying our education system in real time right in front of everyone. And then instead of acknowledging it and saying, hey, yeah, the data shows that it's going downhill, instead the Republican Party is like, well, if we just funded private schools over here and took that money and put it in private schools, we're going to have competition, and that competition will somehow magically make the public schools better, even though we're still in charge of their funding. You know, like it doesn't make sense. It's completely, I'm not going to criticize. Sorry. It doesn't make sense. And it's an effort to lower the budget costs around schools so they can cut taxes. It's the only thing they get excited about and the only thing they brag about.
Right. I wanted to circle back on something we kind of started out talking about, which is just the general divisiveness between parties. And I just wonder, like, how are we even going to fix that? How is that even possible? And what would be the first steps?
You know, I think the first thing to understand is we're not going to have unity. That's a big talking point of the Republican Party and some people in the Democrat Party too. So we need someone to unify the two parties together. And here's the thing. That's authoritarianism. Unity is we're all going to believe the same thing under one mantra with one leader, and we're all going to follow lockstep, right? That's not America. That's not the United States of America. The United States of America is we're all different. You know, we all have different perspectives. We all have different viewpoints. And the America process is civility. We are going to treat people with respect while we disagree with people. And then we're going to come to a compromise. Our whole system is set up that way. That's why we have a legislative body, because we want people to sit or stand on the floor of the state house and argue with each other and then say, thank you for your time. We appreciate your perspective, and then sit their asses down. Right? Am I allowed to cuss on this podcast?
Oh, yeah. That's fine.
Okay. I do cuss every once in a while. There are a lot of people who, not a lot, there's a handful of people that don't like the fact I cuss on my podcast, and then made that very clear. It is what it is. Most rural Iowans cuss, you know, so I'm a rural Iowan.
There you go.
You know, but the reality is that our system is designed for compromise. It's designed around civility, and it's designed for compromise. It's not designed for unity. And that's a massive perspective shift that both parties need to understand. We don't want all Republicans and we don't want all Democrats. We want compromise, and we want to treat people with respect. So I say that with a heavy heart right now, because yesterday, my entire campaign, I've been very clear from the very beginning, I'm not going to do negative ads. And to Jeff Shipley's credit, he has not either. I haven't seen a single attack ad from him that's been attacking me. Now, mind you, parties work with their candidates. And so I don't know what kind of, relationship Jeff has with the Henry County Republican Party, but yesterday the Henry County Republican Party decided to put out a flyer that was incredibly misleading and incredibly dangerous. I'm looking at this thing, and it has me in. It's all sort of dark red letters that are on a black sheet. It looks like some 1940s horror movie type, poster. And it has me darked out in gray, grayscale with Nancy Pelosi and AOC and Chuck Schumer. One of those kind of just the kind of ad that I would see is silly. And I started laughing the second I saw it. I feel like, hey, I made it. Like I'm Nancy. What do you know? People I've never met. Whatever, And I'm like, but then I'm thinking about it and I'm looking at it and it's all lies. It's all like they took quotes from our podcast and completely misrepresented them to make me look un-American and mean, all this stuff. And I thought about it for a moment and I thought this is actually sort of serious. Someone just attacked Nancy Pelosi's husband with a hammer. He had to have brain surgery to repair his skull last week because someone broke into their house. And then in Pennsylvania, a state house candidate got attacked in his own backyard and was knocked unconscious by someone who was protesting his politics. That ad that the Henry County Republican Party sent out was dehumanizing. The idea is to demonize the other candidate, right? Is to make them seem less human. So therefore you can attack them. You can see them as not your neighbor. And that's exactly what this thing looked like. It was not cool. Not okay. It actually made me think twice about my own family's safety, considering current news stories right now. And I'm a little disappointed. I'm really disappointed in the Henry County Republican Party for putting that out. And I'll say Henry County Republican Party leadership. I know most of the Republicans in Henry County. It's just rural. A lot of them are my family and friends. My uncle was a state legislator for 24 years here in Mount Pleasant as a Republican. They wouldn't have approved that ad. Most of them wouldn't have. They would have fact-checked it and been like, yeah, this is lies. This is stupid. This is not okay to put out. And they would have changed it, but not leadership. Because right now leadership has taken on this very extremist type focus. The edge of the party has now become the leaders in the GOP right now. And those who used to be more centrist have been sort of swept to the side and called rhinos, Republican in name only. And so the Joe Mitchells have been sort of pushed off. And the result is these flyers. The result is I have to go to bed every night wondering if someone's going to break into my house. And this is rural Iowa. I should be able to keep my doors unlocked and not worry about it. So
yeah, that's awful. Yeah. And cool. And I know exactly what you're talking about in terms of why I do some graphic design and I'm a video editor. So I know that I can, make a person's message sound any which way. And it reminds me of when CNN was trying to cancel Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
It's neither here nor there, but he was like, they took this video of me, like he was just doing an Instagram story, right? And they took that footage and they graded out and made him look like he was all unhealthy and whatever. But it's just such a distortion of reality. Yes. Is the bottom line.
So yeah, that's the divisiveness, and it's intentional divisiveness run by, quite frankly, it's a really well put together flyer. Like it's really high end graphic design, right? Like it's not someone didn't put it together on their Microsoft Word with clip art. You know what I mean? So in all likeliness, they paid a consultant, and the consultant thought this was okay, and then they just approved it. Someone had to go and listen to our podcast. They actually put our podcast website on the bottom of it and said,
Did you get a bunch of followers as a result?
That's correct. Like if you go to our website right now, threerealwhiteguys.com, it says, welcome. It's good to be here. Thank you, Republican Party, for Henry County for sending so many people our way. Like we've seen this spike in listeners, and that's great because that's the point. We want listeners from rural Iowa, from our district, to hear this message because they're not getting it otherwise. And I'm happy about it. It's actually not a bad thing. And we actually created a new episode last night that sort of goes through point for point what this ad said. And we literally said, okay, that is in season 4, episode 3. I think I gave a reference and said, this is what it was about. And it had nothing to do with how they're marketing it. So we're open, and we're not deleting episodes. We're not getting rid of quotes. We're not editing. Like they just misrepresented us, and we're just showing it what it really was. They're dependent on not going and looking, right? I mean, that's their tactic. Anyway. Yeah.
And misinformation just being like the biggest weaponized, thing.
Right.
Yeah. I'm curious to get your thoughts. I know this might seem off topic, but like Elon Musk just bought Twitter,
Right.
and just like kind of gutted the place, but he's doubling down on free speech. You might even want other people who are banned on that website to come back.
Sure.
What do you think about that?
I think free speech, honestly, is not Twitter. It's your right not to get arrested if you want to say what you want to say. To me, those are companies. Companies can put whatever policy they want in any setting. So I get a little annoyed when people talk about, that's free speech on Twitter, and they're censoring people. Like, no one's censoring you, Donald Trump. You can walk outside right now and say whatever the heck you want, and likely people are going to show up with cameras and a microphone. You had the press room at the White House. You could have at any point in time walked down and say whatever the heck you want. Twitter is a unique platform where you don't have to deal with the direct quotes. You can literally craft a message that's targeted yet vague, and it's a style people can use to incite. And he liked it. It worked well for him. It works well for AOC, right? She does the same thing. It's a tool they use. But to me, that's not what free speech is. And it's a common misunderstanding of the law to say that Twitter, you're when you censor somebody, you're censoring, and that's censorship. I'm like, no, it's not. You can say whatever you want. Are you going to get thrown in jail because of what you said? And the answer is no, right? That's free speech. So Twitter can do whatever the hell they want. He's tanking the company right now. I don't really care. My concern is that he has a massive staff that he's just gutted and fired with almost no warning. And in addition to that, he's asking his current staff to make up for the stuff. And they're working, from what I've read, 70 plus hours a week and stressed and pulling their hair out. And that's just not okay. You have this billionaire coming around and just telling people what to do. And that, to me, is, if we're going to go to economic development eventually, that is what's wrong with the United States right now, is we have a handful of super wealthy people just going around and playing with people's lives and their companies and their jobs and their health insurance. And we'll go there if you want. I'd like to go to economic development if you're good with
Yeah,
that.
I'm super into that. Just yesterday I was, my first home inspection, right? I'll just go off on a little thing, but major policy just in one of the ritziest, neighborhoods. And we get done with that inspection. I go over to the next one. It's it's a mobile home trailer park, not 2 minutes away from the first inspection. Right. And I double check on the deck sheet, and they're covered for about $28,000, and I don't even have to walk around the thing to say that it's a total loss. Right. And I got to shake hands with this guy, and he was 35 years retired firefighter. And I'm just thinking, like, man, what a hero and what an awesome person. And his entire coverage for that trailer, it wouldn't cover the foyer of the house previously. Right. And there's just something really...
Right. It's not going to repay the trailer either. If his max is $28,000, it costs, what, $50,000 to $100,000 to replace the trailer?
Now? Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry.
So anyway, there's this, so I see it almost on a daily basis, and it just, that degree of wealth discrepancy. Gosh, I don't know if I suddenly, if I won the lottery, that $1 billion Powerball or whatever that we keep seeing pop up.
That's right. Yep.
I would have so much guilt if I didn't give every single person in Fairfield, whatever the math is, $50,000 or something, or whatever it is. I'm just thinking, God, can't we just share a little bit more? It doesn't even have to be this sort of boogie woogie socialism thing. Come on, we're all just good people, can't we?
That's the part that I struggle with. When I was a lobbyist, I lobbied for the Iowa Catholic Conference, and I got to see firsthand what corporate lobbying does to our system. We talk about socialism all the time. We talk about communism, and there's all these. Anytime you talk anything about regulation, the words communism or socialism get thrown out, and as an attack word. But I saw clearly lobbyists lobbying legislators and getting laws passed that only benefited their company. that gave them a competitive advantage in the market because of, it would be like my favorite one I ever saw in terms of a bill that came through, got introduced by a legislator out of Council Bluffs. And he had, in his district, he had a distribution center that had, I think, 2,000 square yards of shelving, right? I don't know what the right term was. It was some weird random number. And the legislation said, this will provide a tax break to any business in Iowa that has between 1,995 square yards and 2,005 square yards of shelving. That kind of very specific tax break only for that particular business is what this legislator was fighting for, because his constituent with a lot of money had hired a lobbyist to push him to do that. And he's pushed it through. He didn't get it passed. He got a committee on it, a hearing on it. Like, that's happening daily at the state capital. It's happening daily in DC, right? That's socialism for corporations. That's how do I use the power I have as an owner or as a company to be able to increase my advantage in the market and make it so you can't ever be successful and compete with me. That's not capitalism. That's taking advantage of the system and basically tilting the board law playing in favor of those few corporations. And right now that board is tilted dramatically in favor of what? 17 conglomerates in the U.S. right now who own 200 businesses each, and they're all decisions about each of those companies are being made in boardrooms in New York or Dallas. And now West Liberty Foods is closing their plant. You know, we just lost 350 jobs in Mount Pleasant. We'll lose them in December. They just announced it a couple weeks ago, last week. 350 jobs because Subway decided that they wanted to add meat cutters in their restaurants instead of having them pre-cut at West. Wow. Yeah. So one decision in a boardroom in Connecticut took out 350 jobs in Mount Pleasant, Iowa. Like, that discrepancy, that lack of understanding of their decisions because they're trying to make a few more dimes on their bottom line, literally cost 350 people their jobs and all their health insurance. And they're probably going to have to move because those type of jobs aren't available right now. There's some, and they'll be able to fill some of them in, but we're going to lose hundreds of employees, from Mount Pleasant. That's $10 million from our economy in Mount Pleasant, which is already struggling. We need that money to cycle through to our restaurants, to our businesses. So, yeah, I could go on and on about this, but that is the key problem we have in our system right now is we are letting these large companies run rampant, and they have no accountability at all to the company, to our people that live in our rural communities. And they're making decisions that impact us every day. It's why I didn't like the Clinton policies with NAFTA. It's why Hillary Clinton got handed it in the Midwest in the elections in 2016, because we all knew what Bill did to our companies that moved to Mexico. We took away the power of people to control their own economy during those decisions. And the ramifications are obvious for most of us.
Yeah. How do we improve on that? And also, when it comes to keeping young people in Iowa, what can we do? Well, besides like more movie theaters and I don't know, putt-putt golf. And I remember there was a lot of cool things like that in Fairfield. They don't exist anymore.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right. And that's part of it is you have to have jobs that can pay to afford fun, right? And if someone's living paycheck to paycheck, they're sending their money to pay the bills. They're not paying to go roller skating, right? And so part of it is you have to have decent paying jobs. So that is a mix. You do still have to have these foundational companies that are larger companies, and that varies. It's like Lowmont Molding in Mount Pleasant. It's Cambridge in Fairfield. It's Dexter Laundry. These ones that are just important to have as your foundational ones, right? But we have to be investing in new companies. We have to be investing in building companies from Fairfield, from Mount Pleasant, not peacock feathering, and saying, here, come build a new manufacturing plant. We don't need any more manufacturing plants. We got plenty of those jobs. They're good people that work there, and they're good paychecks, and they're good ladder jobs for people that want to grow. But if you don't have local ownership and our companies aren't owned by people living in our community, then the profits don't stay here. So all that money that's on the backs of these workers that do go to the owners, it's leaving our community. So there's a nice new park in Connecticut somewhere, there, because of the subway decision. Some owner got a big dividend because of this decision for Subway, and suddenly they're going to make a donation to a nice park in wherever in Connecticut he lives because he wants a park in his backyard or she wants a park in her backyard. If you're not here, those profits don't stay here. And so one thing I love about Cambridge, one thing I love about Dexter is those profits stay here and they cycle through here. You see the direct result of that. You see the rec center get expanded from the old school because of Cambridge, right? You see Dexter and Cambridge and others giving to the new child care center. That's going to be a huge impact on Fairfield. You have to have local ownership. And if you don't, you lose jobs and you bring in more jobs and you lose those jobs, and it causes a cycle of poverty that we live in right now without any kind of community benefit. So that's how you do it. We have to start focusing, instead of focusing all of our economic development opportunities on smokestack chasing is what it's called. We need to focus on economic development and starting new companies here, entrepreneurship with the talent that we have.
And how does that actually translate into, what are you voting on? What is it? Or what do we see Mike doing here?
All kinds of stuff. If we're going to go there, I'll go deep on this stuff. So I like it. Yeah. So economic development, there's tons of money in economic development in the state. They give out all kinds of grants, all kinds of research and development incentives. Just the vast majority outside of education of the state, of the funding that we spend as a state, goes toward economic development because we collectively agree, Democrats and Republicans, that business is good. Having people start businesses, bringing businesses to Iowa means more money within our state, and it'll help our state grow, right? That's sort of a baseline piece, right? We start dividing in how we see it on what type of businesses we want to grow, who's in charge of where that money goes to, right? So right now, John Deere gets a ton of money for research and development. We're not sending that money to Fairfield or Mount Pleasant or Keosauqua. That money needs to be redirected. John Deere's doing fine. They have enough profits to be able to do some of that research and development themselves. I like John Deere. They're a good company. They're a great Iowa company. They're based headquarters in Illinois. But that money can be redirected. Now, that's only one piece. We just got some fantastic infrastructure bill money that the governor likes to brag about, even though her entire party voted against it. But hey, we got a lot of infrastructure money. And I'm sorry, I get a little bit cheeky sometimes. We got a lot of infrastructure money. And one of those, for example, is a $30 million venture fund that is going to be instituted here, I think, in about a month in Iowa. They partner with a local nonprofit in Des Moines, and they're basically going to be looking at, I think it's manufacturing, new manufacturing, tech, and ag related industries of new companies they're trying to start up. This might be a specialized ag sprayer that, tracks per inch how much fertilizer should be sprayed into a certain part of a field, right? These are companies that are new, they're high tech, and they're not John Deere, right? They're new ventures and new business people trying to start companies. This is a venture fund that's going to invest in them, and any kind of profits they gain, any kind of dividends they gain, is going to right back into the venture fund to invest in other Iowa new companies, startups, right? I work for an organization called New Boco up in Cedar Rapids that has a venture fund of its own, but also spends, we get a lot of government grants. That's part of my job, is to fundraise and to write grants. And we have tech education grants that work in our schools to help people learn how to code, because that's where the future is in terms of almost any kind of innovation is in tech. Culture, tech, you have to be able to write new scripts, create robot stuff that help with better processing in agriculture. We have entrepreneurship grants, and so we work with startups. We show them how to do marketing, how to write a business plan, how to create what's called a moat around your business, so China doesn't steal it, right? Because that happens a lot with a lot of companies. You create a new thing, you get a patent on it, China doesn't care, they create their own version of whatever you just created. So you have to be able to build a moat, so people can't do that. There's all these little things that a lot of just startups don't know, and this will give them the ability to find out and to grow their companies accordingly. So there's lots of ways to do it. There's lots of funding we can provide, especially to our rural communities, to make that happen. I can go on forever.
No, that's fantastic. Well, maybe you can, I mean, what else would you speak to that for folks that are just getting to know you and perhaps are undecided? I mean, what else do you represent? What else is important to you?
The biggest other piece I'd say is belonging. By far, it's belonging. I think the most common social thread we all have is we want to know we belong somewhere. We want to know that this is our community and we're welcome here. There's a quote I like to say that is by Thomas Jefferson. It's on the Jefferson Memorial and Jefferson Monument in Washington, D.C. It's behind the statue there. And it says something like this, and I'm going to butcher it. I'm sorry. I don't have it in front of me, but it says something like, I do not advocate for frequent changes in laws and institutions, laws and constitutions, but laws and institutions must go hand in hand with the development of the human mind. As that becomes more developed, more enlightened, as opinions and manners change, so too must institutions change to keep pace with the times. And then he goes on to say, you don't wear the jacket that fit you when you were a boy. Like, it just doesn't fit you anymore. You've changed. You've grown, right? And so I've said this at a couple other forums, but my view on that is that we build a foundation for our kids to stand up on, and our parents build a foundation for us to stand up on, because we care about our children. But what we fail to realize often is that when you stand up on that foundation they built, the view changes. It's different. We see the world differently, and my kids see the world differently than I build it, right? And my grandparents, they saw the world differently than their parents. And so it's always been changing. There's always new viewpoints. There's always different perspectives on the world. If we don't embrace what our kids are seeing with the world right now, if we pretend our way from 20, 30 years ago was the right way, and we don't respect our kids and their new viewpoints from their view, they're not moving home. They don't feel respected. They don't feel they belong. And I think that's one of our biggest challenges right now we have in rural Iowa is we're just holding tight to this way of life that we cherish so much. That's really not real. The Leave It to Beaver thing that everybody thinks about in rural Iowa has never really been a thing in rural Iowa if you really look at it. But they're holding tight to this perspective and they're rejecting anything new. And our kids believe in the new. They're focused on the new. It's happening regardless. And if we don't embrace it or at least welcome it, they're not coming home. And that's, to me, that is the other thing I care about deeply is if we want our rural communities to survive, to grow, we want our kids and grandkids to raise their families here, we got to show them they belong here too. And it's okay. Even if we disagree on things, we got to be civil with them. We got to show them we respect them as human beings, even if we don't quite understand what they mean by gender identity or immigration or whatever it may be that is a little fearful for a lot of people in rural Iowa.
Yeah, I want to see, especially with that flyer that you saw come out, it's just, it's just classless. And I want to see everything elevate to a higher level, Yeah. It's something that I imagine might have been more existent maybe before I was born that has slowly just degraded over time.
Right.
But just, maybe coming back to kindness and just treating people, it's the golden rule. Just Come on. It's not that hard. And I think every world religion has the golden rule.
Some way, shape, or form. Yeah.
Right.
You're right. You're absolutely right. It goes back to that whole idea of this corporate board in Connecticut making decisions for employees in Mount Pleasant or Fairfield. When you're reliant on a consulting firm in New York or in Texas to create and draft some kind of attack ad, they don't see me as a neighbor or as a community member. They see me as the enemy, right? Now, I know the Republican chair of Mount Pleasant. I like her. We actually have good conversations. We both agree on economic development stuff, right? And I really don't think that she drafted this. She's a good person. And I don't see her as the enemy. But when you're not here and you're not part of our community and we're reliant on all these federal machines that are pushing our politics, we stop seeing each other as neighbors, and we stop seeing each other as community. And that is the most unrural thing we can do, period. And we have to get back to that. And I think rural America is where we lead that. You know, I lived in the city for 10 years roughly, and I knew my neighbors to my left and to my right in the city I lived. And that was about it. I had friends that lived other places. It's really, you don't have the sense of community that we have in rural, where I know sort of everybody for every block, you know, in about 5, miles in each direction. And I think rural communities right now are uniquely positioned to bring civility back to politics because we understand relationships better than most other places.
Yeah, well said. I like that. Well, Mike, just kind of checking the time here, and I know you're busy. I know I'm busy, and we're nearing an hour. But certainly, if people want to know more about what you're about, I mean, they can check out your podcast. Sure. And I'm sure that they're gonna. I mean, you're out there, and but is there anything else we'd leave our listeners with? Yeah,
call me. I mean, this isn't, I'm not running for U.S. Senate here. I'm running for Iowa House. There's 30 something thousand people in the district. It's only 3 counties. It's not even 2 full counties. 2 of them? Call me. Let's go grab a coffee. Let's grab a beer. Like, that's the kind of relationship we can still have in this office. So turn off the TV, turn off Fox News, turn off MSNBC, and call me. Let's have a conversation. Let's meet up and we'll actually talk through the issues together and we'll figure it out together.
Awesome, Mike. Well, maybe when I'm back from this Florida jaunt, we will have a coffee.
Look, right now you're like, I did call you, Mike. And you didn't call me back for like 3 days. What's going on? Sorry about that.
No, it's okay. Honestly, because I think within moments of messaging you on Facebook, and I know for sometimes it's like, I'm not available on the phone, but I'm available online or I'm on the computer. But to your credit, you got right back to me, and we had planned to do this 5 months ago. And like I say, it was I dropped the ball because I didn't know I was going to be down in Florida, but we made it happen, which is awesome. So thanks so much. Yeah.
You too. Look, I really enjoyed this, and I'm excited to grab a beer with you later.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do a beer. Well, yeah, best of luck to you, Mike, really. And thanks for being on the show.
Thank you, Luke. Take care.